Mothering matters, because it does. But y'all were here, and I'll just be honest. Hi. I did not know that Mothering Matters has sponsored the home tour for Christmas until like right now. That just went, and I've never been on it, but now it makes me want to go, you know. So anyway, that's where we are. Kudos, whoever, I guess you guys decide on these books together, right? What you're going to read and stuff, or at least your leadership. Good job. It's a good book. It has a tone that's a little bit high on the mountain, but I liked it. I mean, there's a lot of really solid, good and thoughtful advice in the book, and it's very kindly written at the same time. It doesn't preach at you, but it puts an arm around you and says, now let's think this through. What are we doing? So I think Habits of the Household, I wish that the only thing I wish, and I bet all of you who are reading it, every one of you probably thought that, I want to hear what Mama thinks. You know what I'm saying? Because I do think, anyway, I wanted more of Mama's voice in the book. But it's really good. I thought the 3 questions on page 82 were especially helpful for helping kids understand the behavior. That behavior has consequences. I thought that was really helpful. Good or bad. What did you do? What did you think was going to happen when you did that? What do you think so-and-so felt when you did that? And the point he makes about making idle threats is very important. And I'm sure you've all heard that before, but it's amazing, still to this day, I'll be in Walmart or wherever, and so help me if you touch that once again, I'm going to break your arm. And in this day and age, I want to get her license plate and call it in, But it's just, it's like when I worked for about a year and a half at a pregnancy center in New Orleans, run by the Catholic Church. They hired me to be the director. And as well, my kids were really little, so it got me out of the nursing shift thing for about a year and a half where I could be home a lot more. And I can't even count how many young women in crisis walked in and their first words were, if my mom or dad finds out I'm pregnant, they'll kill me. And I had to take that really seriously. So my first question to them was, is this true? Will they really kill you? And every time it was, no, it's just an expression. But she's really going to be upset, and he's really going to, and I'm going to be grounded, and they hate my boyfriend anyway, and blah, blah, blah. And then I just let them get it all out, But I was obligated that if she had been serious about that, I'd call it in and get some intervention going. And that never actually happened. But then when they realized their parents wouldn't really kill them, we talked about, why does your parent do that? Why will she be upset? Because she wants the best for me and now I won't get to go to college, or, just fill in the blanks. And this was real. And I said, oh, that sounds like love. And then we'd talk about that, and then we'd eventually get where we could involve the whole family and do some provision and actually help in that crisis situation. I think the author's advice of not publicly humiliating your child while you're disciplining them is a good one. That wisdom to do so just in private and off-site, to delay, especially any kind of corporal punishment, but also just admonition, because our voices tend to rise when we're really irked with our kids. Oh yeah. But I thought that was very good advice. It's good advice for a marriage. Never criticize your spouse in public. And then pick a time when it's good to talk about it. I particularly like the author's point that parenting is a high calling, and you guys know that, that's why you're here. And it's a hard thing to really do well. I agree with that. But I thought his use of creation, fall, redemption, consummation was brilliantly used in terms of parents' relationships with children. And it really did get to where I kind of end up and end up is on consummation. Who do you want your kids to look like in 20 years down the road? You know, what do I want to be I mean, that helps me with my own sin, right? I mean, I'm really tempted to spout off or do this or, you know, whatever. In my head, you know, I'm really sinning. And then I think, yeah, and then if Jesus came back just right this minute, he'd catch me with my hand in the pot, you know, or I want him to catch me sane. That would be good on some days, you know. Please, Lord, you know, find me when I'm witnessing to the gospel to a lost person. But we don't get to make that call, right? But thinking about consummation in our own lives is helpful, right? Because the consummation, and Jesus is going to return, is pretty important. I remember one time I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee at an InterVarsity staff meeting thing, and we were having a blast in Chattanooga. If you've ever been there, it's like, I don't know, it's like a candy shop on a street that goes for miles, you know, sort of like that. And we had a break, and and we had our students, we brought our student leaders with us, so we did have students, it wasn't just the staff. So I took my student leaders with me, and I said, now the first thing we have to do is walk down the street and find divinity. Have you ever had divinity? It is so good, and it's that white fluffy stuff with the nuts inside. So here I am, we're looking in every candy shop to find divinity with my students. This was a really valuable use of their time. And I look across the street, and our supervisor of all the staff, like the head guy that was with us, he's out there on the street corner with his students, doing a survey and getting into conversations with people about the gospel. And I just thought, oh, Lord Jesus, don't come while I'm looking for divinity. Don't come now, because Mac's going to look so good. You know? It was just totally ridiculous. Anyway, consummation is a really good thing to think about, especially in the area of discipline. What do you want to end up with, right? And in terms of your people, your children. In the chapter that I was assigned concerning discipline, thank you very much, I think this basic approach is where I want to start. The one thing about disciplining our children is to always keep in mind their consummation. Who do you want to end up with? And it's long term, 20 years down the road when they're no longer coming home every day. Discipline takes a lot of parental energy, consistency, and wisdom. And consistent discipline is actually exhausting. It's an exhausting challenge at times. You just wish you had perfect kids, because then you wouldn't have to constantly corral them or correct them, try to understand them. I mean, it's really exhausting work. I raised, as I've said before here, but I think a lot of you, I see new faces and stuff. I have two boys. There's that were mentioned in the introduction, and Rob and Scott were 17 months apart. Yeah. And about a month after we got Scott home, the baby, who's now a pastor, we adopted a puppy. That lasted about 2 weeks. I said it's either the baby goes or the puppy goes, because I can't do both. And I shared this once in a book club that I was in, and there were 7 of us there that night. 6 of us had given a dog away while our children were little. So that's just a throwaway caution. So you don't have to make those guilt-laden type of things. Anyway, when you think about consummation as part of discipline, as the aim of discipline, really, it will help you take a deep breath and say, someday this will be worth it. Right now, they're just gonna, depending on their age, they're either gonna cry or sulk or sit in their room and you're gonna worry about them, you know. Or up the line, junior high kids, high school kids, you know, they're gonna be like this for a while. But in this book, on page, I read ahead a little bit. This was about screen time, but it could have been, I think it's the central point about discipline that I am gonna share in my talk today. But at the bottom of page 97, he quotes G.K. Chesterton. Now, after our boys the youngest was 2 years old, we did adopt another beagle. We got another beagle, and his name was Chesterton. No, the first one was Pete, and then Chesterton, and then just a year ago this week, our Gilbert died. So it's Gilbert, Keith, Chesterton, and people ask me all the time, are you going to have a Keith? And I go, no. All right, so G.K. Chesterton, the names of our dogs, he says this, it's just beautifully written, typical of Chesterton. We might fancy some children playing on the flat, grassy top of some tall island in the sea. He was a Brit, by the way, so he lived in an area that had all kinds of these islands in the sea, in the middle of the ocean. So long as there was a wall around the cliff's edge, they could fling themselves into every frantic game and make the place the noisiest of nurseries. But the walls were knocked down, leaving the naked peril of the precipice. They did not fall over, but when their friends returned to them, they were all huddled in terror at the center of the island, and their songs had ceased. And his point here is a barrier on a cliff. Sometimes we can think, well, that's rather confining. No. What it does, in fact, give a measure of security to the boundaries that are dangerous, right? And then you can play without worrying that you're going to go off the cliff. Discipline is a boundary on an island, a high island in the British Sea, surrounded. Discipline is what helps your children play. Discipline in the long run helps them be safe. The point of discipline isn't taking away, all that kind of stuff. The point of discipline is security. And security breeds freedom, because you know where the lines are and you know what you won't cross. At least you can, aim in that direction. So I think the most important thing to keep in mind when disciplining our children is don't look at the moment that you're in when they sass back or break this or don't obey you here and just react angrily or give up. Discipline your child with an eye fixed on what you want them to be. Who do you want to see 20 years from now? Not only does that keep you from just giving up because you just don't have the energy to do the work that it takes, but it also helps you decide on how to punish your wayward offspring that will hopefully help in shaping who they are essentially as a disciple of Jesus Christ. That's your aim. That's what you want to do. There is a website I want to recommend the person who, I don't know who's talking on screen time. Okay, so I'm going to mention this because I don't know what they're going to say next week. But the screen time person, there is a wonderful program that our pastor's son had at his church down on the Gulf Coast. And it's called Protecting Innocent Eyes. Protecting Innocent Eyes. And I went on their website, great website. You don't have to go to a seminar to get a whole lot of good advice out of that. Protecting Innocent Eyes. And I looked at it and I realized, I am very grateful that I didn't have to raise my kids in the era of cell phones and TikTok and Snapchat and all that kind of stuff, right? I didn't have to do that. But as I read through this thing, we do have grandchildren that are a little like that, and when they come to Pop's and Nona's house, you know, they want to play their game or whatever, and we'll let them within reason. And I realized that as I read through this and saw the Protecting Innocent Eyes website, yeah, this just makes sense, you know, and they have a lot of just basic good advice. One thing that stuck with me that I always like to, you know, what do you do in the moment? What do you do in the moment? And so we sat down with our grandkids. I think the first time was they were like 3 and 4 or 4 and 5 around that time. And they wanted to play their game. But you know, every game, because we don't pay for anything on our thing, so you got ads and all that. And some ads now are just, well, from the beginning, are just horrible. So I told them the story that they tell on Protecting Innocent Eyes as a way of discipline and shepherding screen time well. And so we talked about violence, people killing other people, which is rampant in games, nakedness, you know, like somebody's bottom or pee-pee hole, or, you know, you have to kind of just hold your breath and go through it with them. And then what you're supposed to do when you see something like that interrupts your little block game or whatever, the little race, Fletcher loves to do the racing ones. When you get interrupted by something that's that inappropriate, or don't even make the decision, anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, you have to yell at the top of your lungs, "Bear in the woods, bear in the woods." And Protecting Young Eyes said that the internet and going, you know, sending children to play for an hour while you get something else done you got to do, they need to know they can yell for help, because he says the internet is like walking into a dark forest close to twilight. You can see this, you can barely see this, but there are bears in those woods that would love to nibble on your children and corrupt them, maybe even kill the spirit within them. And so if you see these things, and we went through those things right off the website with our grandkids, and their parents do a good job too, because they said, "Oh yeah, Mama said that," or, you know, Daddy said that. So, but we were in our home, this is still going to count, right? And we did Bear in the Woods, Bear in the Woods, and only a few times did they cry out, "No, bear in the woods, bear in the woods." And what you're taught to do is, the minute you see the bear in the woods, you flip the phone or the iPad over. You don't look at it. Don't look at the bear. Because if you look at the bear is more interested in you, and they're going to get you. That kind of thing. Bear in the woods, bear in the woods. And so then I flip the phone over and look at it, and I go, "Oh, that's a little bear, but I'm glad you called me, because someday that bear is going to be big." And then, you know, we just get out of it and, you know, do whatever. But it was very effective. It's very practical like that, to help discipline your children, even with screen time, which is so addicting, even for the youngest of kids. So, wanted to throw that in there. When you look down the road, you also want to realize that you don't see the results of doing the right thing a lot of times with kids right away, right? And I think I'm going to tell you this story, and I'm not sure if I didn't already share this once, but I do see a lot of new faces, so if you'll bear with me, I'm just telling you this story of me and my kids once. They're gone, they're married, they're away, and Scott, our little pastor, he was in the year after he graduated from college, he did his internship at a Presbyterian church in Jackson, Mississippi. And he calls me one day, he says, "Mama, I got to talk to you." And I said, "Well, yeah, hon, what is it?" And he goes, "Well, I just want to know what you would have done." And I said, "About what?" And he goes, "Well, that's what I'm going to tell you." he says, Rebecca and I, he was married at the time, Rebecca and I got a call last night from some kid in my youth group and his girlfriend to come pick him up because they had had too much to drink and they were fooling around a little bit, not to the extreme, but they knew they couldn't drive home. And so could you and Rebecca come get us, one of you drive our car home and stuff like that. And he goes, yeah, I'll be right there. And he went and picked him up. And then on his way, he told he and Rebecca told the boy and the girl sitting in the back seat, if your parents don't call me within 24 hours about this situation, I will call on them because they need to know why we brought you home, that we brought you home, and why we brought you home. Okay? And they said, yes, sir, So 24 hours passed, it's nothing. He goes to the boy's house, he calls and makes an appointment. He said, I just need to talk to you a little bit about Billy or whatever his name was. And he goes to the house and, oh, hi, how you doing, Scott, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, I need to tell you that last night, and he tells him what happened. And he says, the father's reply was, boys will be boys. Isn't that something? Thanks for bringing him home. That was a safe thing to do, and that was a good thing to do. But what a kid. And Scott kind of looked at him and went, and that's all? And he goes, oh, yeah, it's just high school boys. So Scott, who did not have children yet, walks out of the house going, what's with that? Then he goes, makes an appointment, goes to the girl's house. The father again answers the door, and he wants to speak to both the parents. And the guy says, Lily did tell us, or whatever her name was, Lily did tell us about what happened last night. We really appreciate you going to pick them up. And she and my wife, Helen, are off to Memphis she was so embarrassed. She was just so embarrassed. So her and my wife, Helen, they're in Memphis on a shopping spree to make her feel better. So then Scott says, I go, uh-huh. And he says, Mom, I want to know what you would have done to Rob or me if we had done that. And I said, okay, I got two responses to this, basically. You wouldn't have seen the light of day for several weeks. You would have written an apology to the session of the church. You would have, done extra chores. We would have made it very much don't do this again. We would have talked to you ad nauseum about drink, about sex, about all this kind of stuff. He says, exactly. He says, and then he says, exactly. And then I get, oh, boys will be boys, or, reward her with a shopping trip so she feels better about herself. We're supposed to feel pretty bad about ourselves a whole lot as Christians. It drives us to the cross. But anyway, I digress. So then I said, and he says, well, I am going to go and I am going to talk to their parents and I'm going to tell them what they should have done. I'm the youth pastor at this church. Exactly, good luck. So I said, whoa there, cowboy, let me tell you, I got two more things to say. And he goes, yeah, what is it? And he was so receptive at this time. And I said, first of all, they won't hear you because you don't have kids. You really don't understand what it is like to discipline a teenager. And you need to go to your senior pastor and let him handle it. But you go to your senior pastor, you tell him what happened so that he and the elders of the church can pray for these families, and figure out a way to address parenting, better parenting, and certainly teenage behavior within the congregation and in their lives. And he goes, yeah, you're right, they wouldn't listen. And I said, and then he says, what's that other thing, Mom? And I said, well, I want you to remember what it would have been like if you had done this and you did get the punishment that we meted out. I said, you would have made our lives horrible for a minimum of 2 weeks, maybe up to a month. Because punishment would have been at least a month for that. You would have, he goes, what do you mean? You would have slammed doors, slammed cupboards, sat at the table like this. How was your day? Sorry. Did you see so-and-so? Yeah, I saw him. For those of you with young, perfect, beautiful, lovely children, it's hard to imagine this little one being monosyllabic at the dinner table. Yeah. But it happens. It happens. It's that, and every one of us were like that. We were horrible, and I had good discipline as parents. My parents weren't Christians, but I was well disciplined as a child, and thoughtfully so. And I would have paid the price and the whole time. So then Scott says, kind of this dead silence when I finished reminding him how they would have behaved for at least a month. And he goes, Scott, you still there? And he goes, yeah, I think this might be a good time to say thank you. And I said, no, wait just a second. I got to get a tape recorder. I've lived for this moment. And I want to share it with your dad. And Scott just cracked up. He just laughed. I said, seriously, son, you're welcome. It wasn't easy, but it's good to do the right thing. And to bear the consequence of doing the wrong thing. And discipline needs to be thoughtful and all that kind of stuff. We had a deal with the kids when they began to drive, and no cell phones and all that, so they couldn't just, for every 5 minutes you're late on your curfew, whether it was a date or time out with other guys or whatever, every 5 minutes, if I gave you the 10 o'clock, you got to be home by 10 tonight, because whatever reason. Every 5 minutes you're late is 1 day of detention, shut in. Can't do or go anywhere except school. 5 minutes, 1 day. Now that sounds really harsh, unless you call us. You're running late, traffic's terrible, so-and-so went long, we got into this, Mom, call me before the deadline, find a payphone, have a nickel or a dime with you. Maybe it was a quarter, I don't know, I'm not that old. But anyway, find a phone, and it's easier now with cell phones, Find a phone, give me a call, say, I'm going to be about 10 minutes late. I think I'll be back by 10:45. And then we'll reset the clock. Not a problem, because I know you're okay. I know you're okay. And I have to say that it was brilliant discipline, because it only happened to each boy once. They'll test, are you going to follow through? And he makes a big deal about that in the book. Follow through on discipline. Don't say, well, okay. It doesn't work that way. And it was horrible having them home for, I think they were like 10 minutes, so I had to have them no go anywhere at night. And for high school kids, that's like prison sentence, So for 2 days, they had to be there in the house, doing nothing that was fun for 2 days. And of course, they were frumpy about it and all that kind of stuff. But it only happened once where they failed to call and say, we're going to be late. After that, boom. I'm going to be about 15 minutes late, Mom, because we're right in the middle of, whatever it was that we did. That was good and fun. So those are some things about discipline. You have to be willing to pay the price yourself for the discipline that you consistently give thoughtfully and fairly to your children. A couple of other things about routines as being a part of discipline. During the school season, make decisions together, but you wake up, you go to the bathroom, you make your bed, you have breakfast, before or after prayer, get your book bag, have all your homework done, and go. It's good to have those kinds of habits, and that's how our habit, I tried to go back in my head and think, yeah, this is the thing. And when the boys got home, with very rare exceptions, I always greeted them at home. So we'd have a snack or something to drink, and I'd say, okay, it's high-low time. And they could share the high point of their day and the low point of their day. And as junior high kids, or even 6th, 5th graders, they're experiencing the highs and lows of life as they see it at that point. And it just gets a habit of them. It's really okay to come and share everything with us. And you make no judgments on their high or their low. This is their high and their low. So to just listen to their highs and lows can teach you a lot about what bothers your children, or how they think through things or not. I remember a high-low time when our son Dayton, who's pretty tall, and he was trying to make he was on the basketball team of his high school in Tallahassee, and he just came home so mad, and he says, well, I got a low time for you today, Mom. And I said, well, what is it, hon? And so we sat down, and he said, I just don't think Coach likes white boys, because he just doesn't pay attention to me. Like when I do something great, like an assist or make a basket or something, and I look to see if Coach is looking at it, and he just went on and on and on. He was so frustrated not being recognized by his coach, like the black kids were. And he said all this out loud, and I said, okay, I'm sorry that you feel that way. But this is a good time to think about one other thing. Coaches are coaches. You're always going to have a coach that everybody on that team could tell you how the coach has been unfair. But I want you to think about, your best friend James. And he goes, yeah, James was his best friend, black kid, tall, good basketball player. I says, how do you think James feels in almost every other class he takes at school? When does he raise his hand? Is he noticed? If he raises his hand, does he get called on? I mean, statistics have shown color blindness. No. Even if it's subliminal and unintentional, racism exists. It has anything to do with being woke. It exists. It happens. And I said, lean into how you feel, because life is unfair. And this won't be the last time you think you've been treated unfairly. Lean into that. And then next time you feel like that, say, hey, James, do you ever feel like nobody notices you? And listen to him. Came home from school a couple days later, and he said, Mom, James and I had a talk today at lunch, and you were right. Nobody calls on him. He said, nobody expects me to have the right answer. And he just went on and said things that James had said to him. And I had known James pretty well, and I knew that was the case. But I turned this kind of life is unfair moment. I turned it from just a lot of vacuous sympathy, because it's not going to fix the problem, to a learning time to notice that kind of feeling in other people. And it doesn't have to be racism. It can be fill in the blank. What you're feeling right now won't change. It's how you handle it. So let's think how to handle it the next time you feel this way. Our nighttime routine is in his discipline: jammies, brush teeth. Until they were about 12 or in junior high school, we always had a story time together. There was a time that we shared our part of our day, or the worst part of our day. We did high-low as a family, that kind of thing as the kids aged. And we would read a story, or they would read us a story. And a lot of times we got into the habit, it was really fun, where one of us would start a story, and then the next person had the next scene, and the next person had the next scene, and then the fourth person brought it to a conclusion, and they were hilarious. And the first person always made it as complicated and as hard as possible, because that was part of the fun. And so having those habits of time is good. I also remember the time when it was a Saturday, and I was trying to get the boys to clean their rooms. They were in junior high at the time, which is an impossible task. And they were just stuff was everywhere in all their rooms, and they hadn't done it, and I told them, and I begged them, and I had read this book, and it made it all about me and all this kind of stuff. And then my husband pulls me aside and he says, Robbie, sweetheart, oh no, here it comes. I really think you're being too hard on the boys. They're gonna clean their rooms one of these days, and you're just making too big of a deal out of it. I said, am I really? To want them to be able to find things in their room if they get lost? So I disagreed gently and reverently, of course. And yeah. But halfway through the day, I got a call from one of my InterVarsity students, and they were called. There were 4 guys that lived together in this apartment. I had been there before. The time that they called me to come, Robbie, can you come up to our apartment? They were known as the Animals. Good nickname. Anyway, I went to their apartment. They're all Christian kids. I mean, these are great kids. But I went to their apartment, and he said, it's in that cupboard. And they told me they have green stuff growing in our cupboard, and we don't know what it is. What should we do? So I went over and I looked at it, and something had spilled in there, which of course they had never wiped up. And it was just this moldy stuff. And this is a rented apartment. I can't imagine their damage. So I taught them the lesson of Lysol and ammonia and things like that, and watched them as they cleaned it up. It's not lethal, but it's also unnecessary. Pick up after your smell. So I had just done that like the day before. So halfway through the afternoon, when my kids wouldn't clean their rooms, that was like on a Friday night. I went over there on a Friday night. And so this Saturday, I go, honey, would you do a favor for me, make a run for me? I meant to give, and I named one of the animals, this book. And would you just run it over to them? They live at this apartment on such and such a place, and I wrote it down. There wasn't any map thing in the car in those days. And so my husband said, sure, I can do that. Yeah, I'm just listening to the game, I can do that. 20 minutes later, he's back. Boys, come in here. Here come Robert Scott, because Daddy doesn't yell. Mama yells. But my husband is the calmest, coolest. Man, I married a winner. He's just terrific. He really is. If you know him, you're just like, oh, what a guy. But anyway, boys, they never heard him say that out loud, and I thought, it worked. Sneaky little mama. He goes, your mother has asked you all day to clean your room. Go and do it now, and then he meted out a punishment. Yes, Daddy, we will. They always obey their dads. I don't know what it is. I guess our voices, Anyway, I just never told him. And then I said, so how are the animals? He goes, they're fine. And I gave the book to so-and-so. And he says, and I know they're great kids, but man, that place is a wreck. I said, yeah, I was over there yesterday and I helped him clean a cupboard. And he goes, really? And I said, yeah, it was full of mold. He goes, I believe it. Connect the dots, my dear. That's why I want them to clean their room, so they don't join the animals in their life of decadence or something. In high school years, they're maturing years. They really do have more self-motivated behaviors and times, and they make more of their own decisions. But they're always marked by some measure of foolishness and attempts to define themselves as their own. So you just have to remember your own years sometimes and bear with them during those years and with a measure of wisdom and this idea of consummation in time. One vivid memory I have of a conversation I had with our older son, I had in a car, teenagers will talk to you more if you're driving and you're in a car, because you're looking straight ahead, they don't have to look you in the face, especially if they have to cough up something they know you won't like. And that's just true. And so our older son coughed up something that he knew I wouldn't like. And on one such occasion, this beloved son told me something he'd done that he knew I might hear about through his friends or their mothers. On one such occasion, it was so stupid and unexpected. I was so like baffled and confused and like, why would he ever do something that dumb? You know, I just, okay, Lord, help me. Don't unhinge me now, because this will not be helpful. Help me know how to handle this. So I didn't pull over to the side of the road, which is what I wanted to do, so I'd have a captive audience and really read him the riot act. But I did express a deep disagreement and the disapproval of what he did, and how foolish and stupid it was. And this was his reply to my attempt at mothering. He says, well, it's really your fault and Dad's fault, because you never really told us not to. This was another sentence I never thought I'd hear from my son. And by this time, I am over the boiling point. If I were a pot, I just put the electric stove flame out. I mean, I'm just inside. And I just said, Lord, what do I say to this? This is so stupid again. What do I say? And it came to me after several silent minutes of me just driving and him waiting for me to respond. And then very calmly I said, oh, I'm going to share this with your brother too, but I think this is a good time to share this with you, Rob. I don't ever want you to rob a convenience store when you're an adult or at any time. Please, don't ever, it's wrong to rob a convenience store, armed or not. Total silence in the car. I'm driving. Lord, you better make this work, because I'm keeping my cool in my head, right? And Rob goes, never forget it, because it was so awesome. He goes, touche, Mom. Exact words. Touche, Mom, touche. Okay, am I going to have to tell you everything you're not supposed to do? I'm not the problem here, neither's your dad. You did this dumb thing all on your own. And if you think I need to tell you everything you can't do in life, you'll never get out of this car. So, touche, Mama, touche. Every once in a while, you're going to get a touche, Mama, and you just go, high five, Jesus. All right. As older children go to events or parties, things like that, outside of the household, with their friends or whatever, and you know, as they get older, you're not going to know all the parents of all those friends and stuff like that. You need to help enable your children to know how to handle places that aren't Christian and aren't like the home that they're growing up in and things like that as they make friends. So in high school, you have to be very frank with your kids about it's okay to blame us to get out of something you're uncomfortable with. Blame us. Because they want to save face in the moment, and I get that. So we had a code. And the code was, they would go to their friend's phone and say, because this was before cell phones, now it would be a lot easier, but how to handle it is the same. He would call me and he'd go, okay, hang up. That was our code. Okay, hang up. So it was real brief. And then they'd go back in or get something more to eat or something, kind of fool around. And then when he'd see his friends, depending on the situation, he'd go, that was my mom. I got to come home in a little while. She's coming to pick me up. Or if he had the car, oh, that was my mom. I got to go, guys. Bye. And it could be violence. We were a very anti-violent family. It could be pornography, and you think it's a constant temptation for men and boys. Things like that were Bear in the Woods, right? Bear in the Woods. We gave them a code of how to get out of something. I also thought of this for the talk because of that, and this doesn't really have anything to do with the topic right now, but that little girl that got lost, that got picked, or the guy tried to pick her up, but he didn't. But then she said he didn't know the code word, Mom. But his car was black and it was like this, and she was like 12, so she could know some, and she asked the guy, what's the code word? Because we had a code word in our family. If somebody tries to pick you up and you don't know them, but they say, because this guy said, hey, your brother's really sick, your mom and dad want me to bring you home. And she said, because she was trained to say, what's the code word? And he just took off. And so then when she got home, like 2 blocks later, she says, Mom, if this happened, and she explained it to him, and they called the police, gave a description of the man in the car as good as the little 12-year-old could do. Yeah, that family wasn't grieving that night because they had a code word. As your children age and you think of situations they might get into, code words are great. It helps them manage the moment, and it will protect them in the long run. But that simple thing about just call me, say this, and either I'll come get you or you can make an excuse of why you have to come home. My mom called. And that helps them save face with their friends, which at that age is important. But they get out of a situation they're not comfortable with. They tell you about it on the way home if you're driving, or when they get home if they were driving. And then you talk about what was offensive about that and what made them uncomfortable. Of course, my favorite topic concerning discipline concerns the importance of helping children from about the age of 4 to worship in a full congregation. My book, Parenting in the Pew, is all about that. I just want to say this today. From the year before kindergarten, keep your kids with you and in the worship service. Help them pay attention and to actually engage in every step of your congregation's service of worship. Don't give them things to distract them. Let God be their distraction during this time. No toys, munchies, books, phone games, all that kind of stuff. And in the book, I have practical things that you can do to help discipline your student, your child, in the art of worshiping. In the Hebrew, the word for worship and service is the same word, abat. Abat. And you're serving your children in a worship service, and you're serving the Lord in the worship service if you help train your children how to engage with the worship service. Even before they can read and you're singing a hymn or a praise song or whatever, tell them to lash out la la la, follow the notes as best they can, but just sing la 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 before they can read. Make a joyful noise before the Lord. That's in Scripture. So have at it, you know. During a sermon, you would have your sweet little one who I haven't seen in so long hold my finger. Now, every time the pastor says Redeemer or whatever, you look at the sermon illustration and or sermon title usually, and you know he's going to say Redeemer, like the Redeemer. So he's going to say Redeemer a lot in that sermon. So you say, come on, squeeze my finger every time you hear Redeemer. 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 Right? But what that's doing is preparing them for kindergarten, when they have to listen to long things. And it helps them, even sometimes, well, they just don't get anything out of a sermon. Well, neither do you. None of us get everything out of it. None of us. The pastor who made the sermon gets more out of it than anybody. But it's a good discipline to learn how to listen. We taught our kids Presbyterian church, so we had like hymns and beautiful music sometimes before and after the service. And we tell the boys to close their eyes and just listen to the music and think, what Bible story would this be a good soundtrack for? And they could do that because they watch cartoons too. And cartoons and music usually go together, and sometimes it's classical music. You know, that kind of a thing. And they would come up with the most insightful things. You know, this is about the woman in the well. Really? Okay. We also had them as a discipline, okay, to prepare their own offering, okay? So either get their own little envelope or the envelopes that the church uses. And in my day, I don't know how much, this would be for littles on up. When they were toddlers, 3, 4 years old, they got a nickel and 5 pennies every time at the end of the day, they put their toys back in the toy box. That's all they had to do when they were little. But when they did that, at the end of the week, they would get a nickel and 5 pennies. And then on Saturday night, before they were going to bed, we'd say, let's get your offering ready for Jesus, okay? Because he helps feed poor people and do all these wonderful things around the world with the money that his people give to him. And whatever you give matters to Jesus. So what he asks of you is the shiny penny. It has to be the shiny penny, the shiniest of the 5 pennies. And also recognize that you get to keep 4 pennies and a nickel. That's a pretty good bargain. It's a wonder not everyone tithes, is it not? So anyway, they would find the shiny penny and put it in the thing, and then I'd tell them to decorate, the envelope, and they love doing that. The deacons who counted the money found it quite entertaining too. For their, planes, bombing planes, or, just, they were boys, who knows what they put. But anyway, when the offering plate comes, they're so excited to give it because it's really theirs that they're giving. Instead of unconsciously training your children that God is just fine with spare change from the bottom of daddy's pockets or the bottom of mama's purse. I mean, when we do that, oh yeah, here, and kids, they'll always go, I want to put something in, I want to put something in. And so, you do the digging the thing and then you give them whatever, and then it comes by and they put it in. They want to be givers. Help them be givers. They'll be giving their whole life. When our son graduated from seminary, and he got the preaching prize, the guy can bring it. He's just pretty terrific. And we were, where's he going to end up, And he's got 2 kids and 1 more on the way. And he calls us. And I go, hi, how you doing? Have you made up your mind? He said, I want to get Dad on the phone because I want to tell you where I'm going to go. Where's my first church? This was 2006. Hurricane Katrina was 2005. About 10 months before this phone call. The Gulf Coast was a wreck. It still is. You go to the Gulf Coast now, you can still see the ravages of Katrina. It's really something. So he says, I'm going to the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Honey, they had you might not have heard about this at Princeton. They had a big, he said, yeah, Katrina. And I said, honey, it's a wreck down there. Can you do that with 3 children? The mom in me was rising up high. And he says, I think it'll be really hard, Mom. But Mom, think it through. It's the shiny penny. The shiny penny? He goes, yeah. You always said to give the shiny penny meant you give that penny because God can do the most with it in the hardest place, for the hungriest people, for the shelter, for the, this is how we train them. That your gift goes to help other people. He says, Mama, the Mississippi Gulf Coast right now is the shiny penny. And that's where he went. He's still there 16 years later. I didn't know that when I was teaching him to tithe, that I would have that phone call so many years later. It's like the loaves and fishes, dear women. Discipline your children in a way that puts them closer and closer to what Jesus wants for them in their life. Even things that you don't even know yet. Because when you do that, Jesus knows how to break their lives open and end up feeding not only them and their families and their 3 kids, but a whole lot of other people along the way that their lives will touch, no matter what they do. Consummation. That last step in creation, fall, redemption. Tell them about Jesus. Consummation. Become the person that you always hope that they would be. You're probably familiar to the sad statistics that show that 20-somethings who identify as Christians have evaporated in great numbers from worship and congregational life. My friends and folks that do Barna survey research let me know a couple of years ago. And also the Lilly Foundation did this too, and they collaborated on this. That parenting your children in the pew, keeping them with you so that they belong not just to you, but to the whole congregation, not just their subgroup, this Sunday school class, the youth group, the college group, this group, but a whole congregation of people. That children who have been parented in the pew with the whole congregation, the statistics, I couldn't put my finger on it right now, but the statistics for children who had been disciplined in the pew to actually serve the Lord in worship it was like 5% to 80%. It was that different. Simply because they always belonged to the church and not just their subgroup. And that's part of discipline. It's part of, when you tell your kids that you have to sit with us. No, you can't sit with your friends in the balcony and send notes back and forth to each other. Really, really, this is really important. We want you to be with us. Well, what if I bring a friend? Then they can sit with us too, and you can help them. You can peer in the pew. You can help show them, and that happened too. But the discipline and the rhythm of Christian worship and belonging to the whole people of God is a great gift that we can give our children, in a sense that they really, really belong. Your leadership team asked me at the end of my talk today to just offer you the chance that if there's somebody here who really needs to pray one-on-one with me about XYZ in your home or something that you're concerned about, it will stay here. I've been a pastor's wife a long time. You wouldn't believe the secrets I take to my grave. But you can share that with me. Or if you have yet to really surrender your whole life and your home and your family, your kids, who you are, to the Lord, I'll be glad to pray with you one-on-one about that too, and see how the Lord takes you from there. Okay? So, discipline your kids, and I really do pray that each and every one of you will get a touche mama one day. That you'll get a shiny penny one day. And you'll know it's worth it. No matter how tired you got, no matter how discouraged you got at times. The Lord disciplines those he loves. And so do parents.